pieces that make sense to you. So step 1, I do the research. Step 2, I do the writing. Step 3, I review it, whatever that might be. Or you can chunk it down into time pieces. Chunk it down into time pieces. You say, I think this will take 20 hours, and I'm going to do it in chunks of 1 hour, 2 hours. What's important about this model, this chunk it down model, if you are using time as your measurement of chunking down, is that you find the length of time that really works for you. And a few things about that. Number one, if you, like most attorneys, never sit down in your office and shut the door and turn off the phone and turn off all the interruptions, there's a good chance that you're going to be really distractible. You know, that your brain is going to go crazy when you go in there to work on this, you know, block of time. So you're going to have to figure out the amount of time during which you can focus. You might want to start with like half an hour, see how you do. It's a muscle, but if you've not done it ever or for a long time, it's a muscle that's probably atrophied for you. But it is a muscle, and you can build it up. The thing that's interesting about this technique, though, is if you choose a chunk of time, say 2 hours, that's too long for you, you'll know, because you'll look at it and you'll go, oh, I'm really hungry. I'm really sleepy. Oh, let's see what's going on Facebook. And you will avoid it. So when we give ourselves tasks to do that are too big for us, we don't do them. Sometimes, eventually, we'll push through, but for the most part, we avoid them. This is a really important tool here, this chunk it down tool. If you do things in small pieces, you will get them done. If you make them too big, you just won't do them. So let's see what else I want to tell you about this. By the way, the thing I want to say about why you do the big rocks first is because when you don't schedule the big rocks, the small rocks fill up your calendar. It's a weird phenomenon. It kind of goes back to what we talked about email. If you spent all your time on email, if you just checked your email as it came in, you could spend most of your day doing that. You'd have almost no dead time because there's always an email coming in. But what's so weird is if you schedule yourself an hour to go exercise and then come back into your email, you can still get through it. So you've really earned time that way. That's a really important thing to know, and it's going to take conscious effort on your part, but it will absolutely reduce urgency if you start to work it this way. So let's see. 2 specific tools. One is the calendar, as we're talking about. Other things that I want to say about the calendar are allow yourself some flexibility. If you do choose to try this out and block time for big rocks, for planning and for things that are important but not urgent, if you choose to do that, don't go from 8 to 10 I'm doing this, 10 to 12 I'm doing this, 12 to 1 is lunch, 1 to 3 I'm doing this, because that will get you backed up for 2 reasons. One is that there are quadrant 1 emergencies we know that are not created by us, that are going to come in and we're going to need to deal with it. If you have no space between your blocks, that's going to be impossible. 2, I have never met a person who was really good at estimating their time. I know they're out there. I just haven't met them. When I say to you, how long is this brief going to take, and you tell me 10 hours, the real likelihood is that you are vastly underestimating. I'm not sure why we do that. It's really not in my line of work to figure it out. Might be a therapy question. I don't know. But it's good to know it, because then guess what? Apply a different standard. When you sit down and you say, how long will this brief take? Okay, I think it's going to take 10 hours. Add some percentage. Let's say 50%. Schedule yourself 15 hours to do it. Because if you wind up with more time, yay. But when you wind up with not enough time, that's part of how you're creating your urgencies. Is that you're, my mentor used to call it, you're trying to stuff 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. It's not going to happen, and you feel stressed and overworked and overwhelmed all the time. If you can be realistic about what you have to do, it's going to go better. So by the same token, when you leave space in between your blocks, you're allowing for urgencies, you're allowing for yourself to take breaks when you need them, and you're allowing yourself the possibility that sometimes things take longer than you think they're going to. That's one tip. By the way, those couple of things I just said are what I call tips, right? So we've got the tool, which is the matrix. Tips are specific things, specific ideas of how to do it. So block your time is a tip, and leave room in between there is a tip, and add 50% is a tip. And so I told you earlier how I had gone and researched all this time management material, and it started to get redundant. So I made a list of tips once I started to see things repeat themselves, and there's 37 tips that I have. And I'm going to sign you up for my newsletter, probably, well, today or tomorrow. And you will automatically get a list of these 37 tips that will come to you. I don't ever give them out till the end because I really want you to figure out how to do this on your own before you just start using the tips. But together, between the tool and the tips, you'll be pretty set up. So now, moving on, let's see if I'm on time here. Moving on, okay, the second tool is the to-do list. Again, you know, not earth-shattering, not shocking, not something you haven't heard before, but pretty important. And again, you can work it however you want. If it doesn't work for you, don't do it. You might try it. Many people do it in many different ways. But here's the purpose of the to-do list. For me, the to-do list is largely small rocks. It's like little niggly things that I need to do that I know if I just did them without making any kind of plan would fill up my entire day. But I don't want to put them on my calendar. I don't want to put dry cleaning on my calendar. So I write it down on a piece of paper. Why do I do that? You remember back at the beginning of this talk, I said there are two ways to be present. One is to do one thing at a time, and the other is to think about what you are doing when you're doing it. Two things happen when people go in their office and shut the door and put on the DND, the Do Not Disturb button on their phone, and turn off their email and eliminate all distractions and sit down in front of a project. Two things happen. One, they have to really resist the urge to do something else at the exact same time, right? Multitasking. But the second thing that happens is a lot like when you sit down to meditate. All this stuff starts pouring through your head. I got to do this. I got to do that. Oh, that's right. I didn't pick up the milk last night. I got to remember to call my kid at school. But the way your brain works is this. If your brain has to remember things, it's not that good at it. It's good at remembering things, but it won't remember them at the time that you need it to remember them, right? Because it'll come up at weird times, like when you sit down to do a project, or 2 a.m. when you're, fast asleep and you wake up, I got to get that thing done, right? But when you write it down in a place that your brain feels it can rely on, as opposed to like on a Post-it note that you feel you might lose somewhere, you've got a real good system. Here's my to-do list. Here it is where I keep it. I know it's there. And you write it down, your brain will let go of it. So if your brain is trying to remember things while you're drafting a brief, you will be highly distracted. You won't be able to be present with what you're doing. So what I recommend is, as you transition into this new way of working, when you sit down, you have a yellow pad next to you, says to-do list on it or whatever, things to remember. Every thought that comes to your head, you just write it down. You won't go back to it. It's amazing how your brain works. If you write it down, you'll let go of it and you'll move on. And then you'll have captured your small rocks. And then you'll figure out where to fit them. You'll either decide that they've carried on too long and you'll put them in your calendar, or you'll keep the list with you and you will find places in your day to stick them in. So, very important to write things down. What else can I say to you? One thing about the to-do list that's valuable is to, well, there's a couple different ways of doing it. Most people, many people, will go over it in the morning. Here's my list for today. Cross things off as they go. Crossing things off is psychologically very rewarding, and we go back to energy management, will make you feel pretty good. And then you can redo it for the next day, however you want to do it. Some people do it on their computer. Some people do it in handwriting. Some people it looks very neat. Some people it looks very messy.